We can't fix all their problems, but we do have the ability to make that journey a little more bearable and help them get on the other side of it healthier and happier if we approach it the right way.
Welcome to The Legal Edge, where we dive into what actually drives law firm growth. I'm your host, Rob Rosasco, and today we're talking about one of the most competitive practice areas in law, family law, and how to build a reputation that attracts the right clients. Our guest today is Maggie Nowell, a family law attorney at the Nowell Law Firm in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Maggie started her career in 2011 at the Kate Law Firm, where she practiced exclusively in family law for nearly a decade. In 2020, she joined her husband, Mark, at the Nowell Law Firm, bringing her 14 years of family law expertise to their family and civil litigation practice. Here's what makes Maggie's story so valuable. She's been recognized as a super lawyer's rising star every year since 2020. She was a part of the inaugural class of the South Carolina Family Court chapter of the American Inns of Court. She's a volunteer and leader in her community, and she's built a reputation that precedes her. She's done so in a mid-sized market where word of mouth and reputation are everything. Maggie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rob. I'm happy to be here.
Good. Before we dive into details and we discuss tactics, let's talk a little bit about how you got your start. You've been practicing family law exclusively for over a decade now. That's a deliberate choice in a practice area that can be emotionally draining and highly competitive. So let's start at the beginning. You started at the Kate Law Firm in 2011, right out of law school, focusing exclusively on family law. What drew you to family law specifically, and how did you know that's where you wanted to start and build your career?
That's a great question, Rob. I actually get that question a lot, as you can imagine, mostly from other lawyers who want to understand why I'd possibly ever make that decision intentionally. Family law is notorious for causing burnout in attorneys because it involves probably the most litigation out of any other area, just in terms of the number of times you're going to court. Then also because the subject matter is so personal, it's so emotionally driven. But really, that's what drew me to it. I got into the law to help people, to give them a voice in a forum where they otherwise wouldn't have one. And family law is really one of the most impactful areas, I think, where we as attorneys can make a difference because we're walking with clients through one of the most difficult times in their lives. And we can't fix all their problems, but we do have the ability to make that journey a little more bearable and help them get on the other side of it healthier and happier if we approach it the right way. So that kind of
Right.
thing has been incredibly gratifying to me, and that's what drew me to family law in the first place.
What's the old adage? Criminal law, you see the worst people at their best, but unfortunately, family law, you see the best people at their worst.
Absolutely.
So, having someone like you that has not only, of course, the knowledge of the law, but can show compassion and help them through the process, I'm sure is something that makes your clients very happy and happy about the fact that they have the relationship.
I hope so. I mean, that's always our goal. There's always a balance between zealous advocacy, but also having good client management skills because they
Right.
don't want to feel like they're just a case. They want to feel like they're somebody that you care about and that you care about the decisions you're helping them make.
Yep. All right. So let's fast forward to 2020. You made the decision to leave the Kate Law Firm and join Mark at the Nowell Law Firm, transitioning from a firm that focused exclusively on family law. And now at the Nowell Law Firm, it's sort of a general practice where I know you focus exclusively on family law, but now the practice is more of a general firm in terms of the areas of law that you cover. What led you to make that change?
Well, for me, in my particular circumstance, the decision was pretty easy because I had worked with Ruth Kate, who exclusively did family law for almost 10 years, and then she announced her retirement. And around that same time, I found out I was pregnant with our second child, and my husband already ran this firm. So it was a pretty natural transition. It made a lot of sense. That was always our plan after Ruth retired. And I was going to stay with her for as long as I could because she took a chance on me and hired me before I even passed the bar. And then she taught me everything I knew. So I learned a lot from her, and I'm glad that I was able to have that experience for so long. But after she retired, I moved over with Mark. And it really was a God thing for me that all the pieces fell into place like they did. So after I came back from maternity leave, I just started with Mark.
So at the time, what did you view as the risk of that transition? Then what was the upside? What were the potential rewards?
The biggest rewards, us, as a married couple running a law firm together, were increased flexibility and mutual interest. We had this practice to run, but we also had kids to chauffeur, and we shared an aligned interest in working together to get it all done. People thought we were crazy to work together. They thought for sure we'd drive each other bonkers. But it really has been the most natural transition. We both have very different strengths that we bring to the table, and that helps us get it all done. But that was the good news. The hard thing was it was December of 2020 when we made that transition. So the timing was definitely not ideal. At that point, I had the steady salary. Mark had this firm that he'd opened for 10 months. The biggest risk we took was putting all of our eggs into this one basket right as COVID had made everybody's future totally unpredictable. I mean, even the way we practiced law and approached our day to day, all those court appearances, mediations, and things like that, everything, we just had no idea what was going to happen. And people weren't hiring lawyers. They had bigger fish to fry in their immediate periphery, and so they weren't thinking about those things. So there was a lot of unpredictability at that time. We didn't know if we'd make it out that first year, but we employed some new marketing strategies that we still use today, and we were thankfully able to grow steadily after that year.
And now 5 years later, it's all in your rearview mirror.
We still have the hustle mentality, but thankfully, our growth has continued steadily, and so we can take a step back and breathe a sigh of relief. Not totally, but a little bit.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, I mentioned super lawyers. You've been recognized as Super Lawyers Rising Star every year since 2020. Congratulations. That's an important third-party validation in legal marketing specifically. How much does that recognition actually impact your practice? And does it have any impact on bringing in new clients, referrals? And do you think it bolsters your credibility?
Okay, let me answer that in two parts. So the first question was, does it bring in clients? I don't honestly know if the answer to that is yes or no. I don't have a way to specifically track it. But what I would say is it definitely can't hurt. Your name is put on this website, and anybody around the country can focus in on practice area, geographic location, and find you even if they don't know your name. I definitely think that's a valuable resource. And I have certainly told people who went to high school with who live in Ohio or Colorado or Texas and are about to go through a divorce might say, do you have any attorney recommendations? Like, I know everybody. So my first thing is I tell them to go to Super Lawyers and look up the practice area and look up their area to find someone. So I definitely think it's a good resource from that perspective. I do think I've gotten referrals from other attorneys through that and maybe clients too. And in terms of does it bolster my credibility, I would like to think there's credibility there. Super Lawyers is one of the few designations that lawyers can get that's truly legitimate. Any lawyer listening to this has probably been bombarded with dozens and dozens of solicitations for this wonderful award, 10 best in the country. Please pay $450 to be included on our list and we'll give you a plaque. So I think we lawyers, whenever we see those kinds of things listed on people's websites or, the plaques in their office, we know that it's a paid for plaque. I'm sure you're a great attorney, but you paid for this. You didn't really earn it. They don't really have a vetting policy. But Super Lawyers is run by Thompson Reuters. So it's one of the few legitimate designations that doesn't make you pay to receive it. And lawyers are nominated by other lawyers and judges in their areas who already are listed on Super Lawyers. So that there's an actual vetting process and it's actually a legitimate designation. So like I mentioned, I will use it for other places because I know that they're truly vetted, or I'll give that recommendation to people in other places because I know they're truly vetted. And it's not just something that it's not like a sponsorship. It's somebody who actually earned that designation.
Due to their legal skills or
Right, exactly.
I completely agree with you. And also, we talked about the ends of court. For attorneys who don't know, what is the ends of court? And again, do you think that helps you build authority or credibility specifically in family law?
Well, let me start by explaining what the ends of court is. So the ends of court, the American ends of court, are based on the English ends of court. which have been around for a long time, and that's how they practice law. All the barristers in England are part of one of four courts, and it's through those courts that they have the right to practice in litigation. So the American ends of court is obviously very different. We have a very different structure, and they've been around for a while, but they're essentially intended as legal mentoring networks. There are ends all across the country in lots of different states, and most of them have specific practice areas. We already had a few civil ends of court in South Carolina, but it wasn't until 2022 that a family law end of court was formed. So Melissa Buchanan, who is one of our judges down in the lower part of the state, she sort of took the reins to start a family law chapter, and she's kept it going for the last 3 years. So what was really exciting to me about it was getting to be a part of this inaugural group where all the judges in the state are invited to be a part of it. And then lawyers are nominated by those judges and by other, smaller group of lawyers to be part of it. So it was an honor to be asked because I think it's reflective of reputation, from these practitioners and judges. So that meant a lot to me. That was very humbling. But really what we do is we get together a few times a year. We engage in continuing education courses about different hot topics in family law, current trends, and things like that. So to me, it's been helpful from that perspective. We get these cool extra continuing education resources. But then also it's been a really great resource for referrals around the state. I kind of talked about super lawyers and how it's great for referrals across the country. And this is really great because it is a trusted source of referrals for if I have people who want a referral for a family law attorney in Charleston or in Columbia or something like that. If it's not somebody I already know that I went to law school with or something, then I know I have a list of all the lawyers in the N from each county, and I know they do family law. Some do it in part, but a lot of them do it exclusively. And so it's been great for that. And then I also think it's been helpful to get and give referrals for niche areas in the field. Like, for example, they're called Qualified Domestic Relations Order, Quadros for short. And that's a specialized order that is required to transfer retirement in divorce cases for lots of different kinds of retirement in divorce cases. So my colleagues in the N have been a huge source of referrals for those kinds of things to me. Because of our network in the N, they know that I do those things. A lot of people don't, and they just send them to me. So things like that have been really helpful for networking and mentoring.
Have you had an opportunity to mentor younger, newer attorneys?
Not yet, but let me tell you why.
Okay.
They have it divided into categories. There's masters, which are attorneys who've worked for, I think it's 20 years or more, or maybe 15 years or more. And then there are barristers, which is my level, 14 years or less. And then pupils, which are like law school students. I just don't know any law school students because they're in Columbia and Charleston. That's not really close to where I am. And I'm not old
Right.
enough yet to be the master. So I'm still, based on my age, I've been practicing almost 15 years, but just on that 14-year mark, I'm still in like the baby group.
And so you'll cross the threshold in a year or so.
Yeah. Then if anybody wants any mentoring from me, I'm available.
All right, very good. So family law, as we again talked about earlier, is one of the most competitive practice areas in legal marketing. Family law, as I'm sure you well know, is very geographically specific. Most people don't want to travel great distances to see a family law attorney. When you get a lot of family law attorneys in a relatively small area, it can be very competitive. Sadly, many people do need a family law attorney at some point in their lives, whether it be a divorce or custody issues or child support, which means that any small town or a small geographical area could potentially have dozens of family law attorneys. So what marketing strategies have you used to differentiate yourself from your competitors and to build your firm and practice? What's worked, and what do you honestly believe has been a waste of your time in terms of marketing specifically?
Okay. So we try to track this because it is important. It's important to know how are people getting to us. We employ various marketing strategies, what's working, what's not, and like you said, what's a waste of your time and money. So we have a line on our client intake sheets to ask them, how did they get to us? How did they find us? So what we've found is the two most common answers are either word of mouth referrals from former clients or people that they know who know us socially, and gave that referral are people that we've worked with before. And then the second thing is online searches. And that makes sense, right? Because those are probably the most common ways that people get to you anyway. Nobody's looking up in a phone book anymore. So, but notably for marketing purposes, what we've tracked is the people who got to us based on referrals from people they knew were much more likely to actually retain after consulting us than those people who came to us after an online search. Even people who came to us from an online search, what we hear from a lot of those folks is after they've retained us is that how big of a role the online reviews for our firm played in their decision to actually come see us and later hire us. So what those two things together tell us as a firm is that regardless of any multi-pronged marketing strategy we may decide to employ, we still have to do the work well so that potential clients can hear from current and former clients that we're a firm they want to partner with.
And you shined a very bright light on something that we believe is very important. And I know we've discussed this before, reviews. I know some attorneys are apprehensive about asking for reviews, but reviews can play a huge role, as you mentioned, in sort of pushing people over the threshold in terms of hiring you. But also Google places a great deal of importance on reviews as a part of your overall SEO presence online. I know we didn't necessarily plan to talk about this, but I'm curious, what's your perspective on reviews, not only as an attorney, but also as a business owner? And what's your feeling about asking a happy client for a review?
I sort of hate doing it, if I'm being totally honest. It makes me feel so, I don't know. And my husband gets on me because he tells me that I need to be doing it more. He is a lot better at it than I am. I think he sends clients a personal email after he's done with their case. If family law is tough because people can have hard situations and they can get results that they're not 100% excited about, even if you did everything that you could do in your job. So you can't send one to everyone because if they had a bad experience that had nothing to do with you, you're still not going to take that risk that they still want to assign blame to somebody besides themselves. So I think, first of all, especially in family law, probably in law in general, but especially in family law because emotions run so high, I think you have to be really selective and not just make it a part of your practice after every case to always ask somebody to do it, because the last thing you want to do is give somebody the idea to, post for everyone to see that they had a terrible experience or whatever. And then I think the other scary thing about reviews for family law attorneys is, we have had to report, and our marketing company has had to help us report a lot of false ones. So it might be somebody who consulted with us but didn't hire because they didn't like what we had to say. Then they had a hearing and put some online that they were mad we didn't show up. It was like, you didn't hire us. Or it might be a defendant who's trying to, just mess with us because they're mad at us, because that's just what happens in family law. So, probably a few times a year we're having to contact Google and report enough facts. We have confidentiality limitations, but report enough facts so that they get it taken down. And we've had to be strategic about how we respond, when we respond, because you're responding to the broader audience, not necessarily that person, but you don't want to add fuel to the fire and they're an irrational sort of, personality to begin with. So I think reviews are really, really important. I think it's just making sure that you're asking the right people. And admittedly, I could do a better job of doing that. But I think if you're going to do it, either putting a line in the letter, that kind of closes your representation, maybe with the final order, just saying, we've tweaked our language. So I think we say something to the effect of, we've really enjoyed working with you. If you've really enjoyed working with us, we always appreciate our clients who post a positive Google review. If you want more information, let us know. Or we could send that in an email with a link, something to that effect, where it's totally invitational, no pressure, but just to let them know we'd appreciate it.
Yep. Yes. You summed that up very, very well. Thank you. Well, let's talk a little bit about your involvement in the community and your personal online presence. You've got an extensive network on LinkedIn. You're active in the community. How much of your client acquisition is your digital marketing presence versus traditional networking out in the community and your involvement in community organizations?
I think it's hard to pinpoint which of those strategies is more or less responsible for client acquisition, but I do think it's important to have both. I practice in my hometown. I'm in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and this is where I grew up. My husband is a transplant. He's from Raleigh, but he's been here for 14 years now. So, there are decades worth of connections and relationships that lead to our name being raised in conversations with people who need a local attorney. But I do think that the key to translating a consult into a client is definitely digital. I think so many more people look online. So even those folks that I was talking about before who come to us because of word of mouth referrals, I don't necessarily think that they get our name and then they immediately call us. I think they get our name and then they check us out online. And so I think that digital presence is of the utmost importance no matter how you're getting clients, how they're getting your name, and how they're coming to you because they're going to check you out to make sure you're legit before they come see you. So I think things like having a well built website, posting blogs with regularity that demonstrate your authority in the practice areas that your potential clients need help in. I think that's really important. And then I also think in this day and age, having a social media presence, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, I think all of those are super important because you just never know where somebody's going to come across your name. Cover all your bases with all of those things. And, some of those approaches, I think for a lot of us are outside of our comfort zone. I just got Instagram like last year, so it's not super comfortable navigating all that. But I think the important thing is even if we're not super comfortable with it, we just hire people who are. And so in our case, we employ a really great legal marketing team who helps us bolster our online presence, helps keep us relevant for SEO purposes. And, if our name, the name of our firm shows up on the first page of a search for the areas we practice in, like family law, or for my husband, Mark, personal injury, workers' compensation, if those are showing up in the areas where we want to be highlighted, then we know we're in a good place from a marketing perspective.
Now, let's take that sort of expound on it a little bit. Again, I know you're very active in your community. Talk a little bit about your activity in the community and your involvement in local organizations. Does that, obviously you do that for more than just business development purposes. It's important to be active in your community, and I commend you for doing that. But does it translate into business development?
I think it does. And you're right. I don't think about community involvement that way either. I volunteer with the organizations whose missions I feel compelled to support. I get involved with my
Right.
church, with my kids' schools, the things that matter to me. I don't do it because I think it'll get me clients. I just do it because I try to be a productive member of my community. But with that said, I do think that as attorneys, the more we're out there being a part of our community in different ways than just being a lawyer, I think the more we're spreading our networking branches, whether intentionally or not. You never know where your next potential client's going to come from. You never know what will influence them to hire you. So I think it's important as a lawyer, especially in a small market like ours, we're in upstate South Carolina, to be a good brand ambassador wherever we go, whatever we do, but especially in our local communities.
Yeah. Okay. And that makes sense. So, Maggie, we've talked about obviously where you practice in Spartanburg, South Carolina, but the fact that Spartanburg is a relatively small community, but still there's a heavy concentration of family law attorneys in Spartanburg and in Greenville as well. You're competing against practitioners that do family law or focus exclusively sometimes on family law. You're focusing on boutique law firms with two or more attorneys that, again, focus exclusively on family law. And then there are a number of general practice firms who not only include family law in their practice area, but do other things as well. What separates attorneys within these particular firms that attract high quality family law clients as opposed to those that are just simply competing or trying to attract clients with low hourly rates or low fees, and the fact that they are available to take on new clients?
This is not going to be a great legal marketing answer, but I think the honest answer to attracting high level clients is just doing good work and doing good work consistently for enough people that anytime somebody with a really legitimate issue who you would consider a good client, somebody you would want to work with, needs a lawyer, they're asking their friends, especially in family law. It's so personal. It's not just anybody can do it. And there are people, like you mentioned, who are looking for the lowest rate or things like that. But when people come
Yeah.
to me and they say, "Oh, I can't believe you're quoting me this. I got quoted this and this from other attorneys." I'm like, I mean, it's a service and you get what you pay for. Some attorney, I never name names,
True.
but
Yeah.
we attorneys sort of know other attorneys who try to undercut, and they undercut for a reason because they need to.
Mhm.
But I think reputation is a big deal. So I think just every time you do good work for a client, then they can become an ambassador for, your reputation and the level of diligence that you have on a case. And then I also think, with some of these lawyers who charge really low rates, they charge flat fees. And that can be really
Mhm.
dangerous because then your interests aren't aligned. These lawyers are trying to get through the case with as little work as possible because they want a return on their
Right.
investment. And then the client says, no, I want to go to trial because they've already paid whatever they're going to pay. So I think it can be dangerous. But I think differentiating yourself really is just doing the good work. And then, like I mentioned before, I think having the digital presence to back that up is a really important secondary component.
Agreed. And you say doing good work isn't necessarily a marketing strategy. And I guess on its face, it's not. But take it from a legal marketer. It's a lot easier to market a law firm that does good work than to attempt to market a law firm that does not. So referrals are sort of a built-in part of any business's marketing strategy. And you only get referrals if you do good work. So I think the fact that you're a good attorney and you do good work absolutely is a part of your marketing strategy. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. So you have focused exclusively on family law since graduated from law school, and you worked at a family law firm that did exclusively family law work before joining Mark at the Nowell Law Firm. What advantages do you think that deep family law experience gave you or gives you in terms of your marketing and client acquisition strategies?
I don't know what difference it makes in marketing, but I do think that having 14 years experience in a singular area of law definitely makes a big difference in client acquisition after a
Yep.
potential client has gotten to the point of having that initial consult.
Hmm.
I think you mentioned this before, but there are a lot of attorneys who just dabble in family law. They don't do it exclusively. So those kinds of attorneys, even if they've been practicing for a while, they primarily do other things. And so I
Right.
like to think of that like the difference between people who've long distance dated for a year versus people who've been side by side together 24/7 on a vacation or something. The depth of understanding is just different. So I think focusing on one area of law, especially over a long period of time, just expand your knowledge and experience base exponentially versus just practicing in multiple areas, that being one part of it or one small part of it. But all that to say, I don't know how much impact that has on people getting to the door. But I think once they're there, it definitely makes a difference in retention.
Yep. Agreed. And, again, speaking from the perspective of a legal marketer, our job is to get clients to the door. We then have to rely on the attorney to close the deal, to bring that client on board. The fact that you have the depth of knowledge within family law obviously increases the possibility that a potential client will hire you. You mentioned being from Spartanburg and growing up there, developing roots in the community. How big of an impact do you think that's had on your marketing efforts, growing the firm, business development? And do you think being a member of the community sort of gives you an edge?
I think it matters to the extent that the longer you live and work in a particular community, the broader your networking can reach. I've
Mhm.
definitely served former classmates or their family members and people who came to me because they knew me from growing up. But the vast majority of my clients I never knew before. And most of them I didn't know anybody else who knew them before, or I didn't know them well enough for that previous connection to have influenced their decision to come to me. So, with all that being said, I think being local will help. But if you're practicing in an area where you're not from, I don't think it's a deal breaker. I do think the longer you practice there, you're spreading your branches. And I think the longer you're there, that helps. But I will say, too, being local and being from a somewhat small town, it will from time to time create a conflict of interest because all either know the other side too well to feel comfortable getting involved, or their kid might go to school with my kid and I don't want to worry about what it's going to look like every year at the Christmas play because
Yeah.
nobody loves a family lawyer. So you don't want to create social discomfort. So there could be some drawbacks to,
Yeah.
practicing in the community that you've lived in for a long time. Some of that's unavoidable, but it's not all good to work in the community you grew up in. But I definitely think,
Understood.
the more people you know, the more people there are to refer clients to you. And I think
Mm.
lawyers who work in towns that they're not from can have just as fruitful an opportunity to engage in their communities and with an online presence now in order to expand that marketing reach.
Right. Understood. And I agree. But I do definitely agree with you as a non attorney and obviously as a non family law attorney. If I ever needed to hire a family law attorney, the level of comfort I felt with them as a human being would be very important to me. So being a member of the community and having that, already taken that first step or two in terms of developing the relationship, I can only imagine goes a long way to, again, furthering the relationship as you support them through that tough time.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about communication and client communication. I know, again, in family law, we've mentioned this a few times throughout our conversation. It can often be the worst time in someone's life, going through a divorce or struggling with custody or support or any aspect of your practice. Talk a little bit about how you approach client communication and how you feel that differentiates your practice from other attorneys or law firms that focus on family law.
This really kind of a delicate topic. It kind of circles me back to those lawyers I was talking to you about at the beginning who couldn't understand why I wanted to get into family law. Some lawyers they just can't empathize with clients. And so I think one of the main things that our firm tries to focus on and that maybe differentiates us from other similarly situated practitioners is we try to operate based on the Boy Scout rule, leave it better than you found it. And so, if you think about it, like somebody about to go through a divorce, a child custody case, we do adoptions too. So that can be happy, but that can also be difficult if it's a, involuntary termination parental rights situation or something like that, it can be really emotional. So our clients come to us angry, they're devastated, they're worried, they're shocked, and everything in between. So our primary jobs, the way we see it, are to help navigate their cases to a resolution, but we also want to aim to take a holistic approach to help them end up in a better place mentally and emotionally at the end of their case than how they started out. So whether that's being, intentional in our style of communication or pointing them to other resources, because we recognize that even though I think our titles are technically attorneys and counselors at law, the latter part is not our expertise. If it means that, clients need to be pointed to a good counselor or maybe their children do, then it's just having the sense to know what your clients need. And if you can't help them with that, because we obviously are limited in our scope of what we can do to help, at least we can
Right.
point them to other experts who can. So even if it's not counselors, it could be wealth managers. They might need some tax consulting so that they understand the broad implications of an agreement that they're being presented with or something like that. So I think doing what we can and then pointing them to other experts who can help if it's not something we can help with. But regardless of any of that we're doing, we just try to do what we can to give people hope in what's always going to be a very difficult chapter in their lives.
Yep. So let's talk about your perception of what your competitors are doing and perhaps talk a little broadly about family law attorneys in general. What marketing mistakes do you see, in your opinion, obviously, other family law firms in the area or perhaps even outside of Spartanburg making? And if you could offer one bit of advice to a family law attorney, what's one thing they should stop doing immediately?
Okay. The one biggest thing that I think is a mistake from not just a family law practitioner, lawyers in general, really businesses in general, is not having a well designed website, or in some cases, any website. I think we are so far past the time of like, just get the domain name and that's all that matters. I mean, people really look to see if you're legitimate. I was looking up something yesterday. It was a lawyer that I was going to be in court with, and I wanted to find out more about him. I looked up his website, and it was a shell. I didn't have a picture. It was like one of those, silhouettes where a picture belongs, no bio. And then I immediately thought, oh, this isn't a legitimate attorney, and of course that's not true. He was perfectly fine, but that's the perception. I think that's the perception that potential clients would have too. So I think the number one biggest mistake a lawyer can have in family law or wherever is not having a well-designed and informative website, because I think that's the first point of contact where your potential clients are being introduced to you and you want to make a good impression there. If they can't peruse your site to learn more about you or to determine if your expertise matches their needs, then 90% of them won't look any further. They won't give you a call. They definitely won't hire you. So I think that's the biggest one. And that would be the one tip I have. But I think another mistake is, and I think lawyers of an older generation make this mistake more often than younger ones, is just not having an online presence elsewhere. They may just do their website, but they don't do social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. They're all separate sites with separate sets of readership. So I think engaging in all of those and as many of those kinds of things as you can just expand your reach that much further. I think not being intentional about SEO, search engine optimization, or not understanding how that leads to traffic generation is a mistake. I think if you don't know what you need to include on your website or on your online presence, hire a marketing company that does, because that SEO is so important in terms of like new posts, cross-referencing, geographic specific data, and things like that. The algorithm is constantly changing. So it's good to have a good marketing firm, unless you know all the things and are willing to keep up with all the things. But presumably you're not, because that's why you're practicing law and not in the marketing world. But it is important to keep up with all that, or have somebody who's keeping up with all that and adapting your online presence accordingly, because all that really is so important. And then I think related to that would be a mistake would be not investing in physical and digital marketing. I think people who hang up their shingle just don't have a lot of energy for things like that. But that's a part of the hustle. That's a part of how you get your name out there and get people familiar with you. And so I think, living in a small-ish town and we have a relatively small bar, I'm still sort of shocked whenever I see an attorney's name that I've never heard before, because I feel like I should know everybody. So when that happens, I've been around for a while now. When that happens, is because those people have done nothing to put their name out there. So unless you happen to drive by their office or are specifically driven to their website for a reason, you wouldn't otherwise know they exist. So, that's sort of a young lawyer tip, is like you really just have to work to get your name out there. And I think online is the easiest way to do it. And then, we talked about reviews before, and I think it is a mistake. I did admit that I'm not the best about it. So I still reiterate that, but I do think it's a mistake not to focus on online client reviews, increasing good ones or mitigating bad ones. That can be just as important.
Right.
We've had people come who told us that there was a review and it was one of these kind of fraudulent ones where they said something happened. They weren't even a client. We had no record of them. And they said, we really appreciated seeing your response to the bad reviews, because then it told us, you're a legitimate company. We don't need to worry about whatever. So I think reviews can make or break somebody's decision to hire you, and including your response.
I completely agree. And, something I've said, countless times, not only to our clients, but also to friends and family. And I subscribe to this philosophy as well. Obviously, if it's a fraudulent review, that falls into a separate category. But seeing less than positive reviews, less than stellar reviews, it actually, I'm comforted by that, because you can't make everyone happy. No business, no person can. Some less than stellar reviews proves to me that this is a legitimate business, and all of these reviews are legitimate.
Right.
Far too often, businesses go out and pay for reviews just to get as many 5-star reviews as they possibly can. And sadly and unfortunately, they're not legitimate. So everything that you said about reviews, I completely agree. Something that struck me as you were talking just now, you mentioned or suggested that as a business person, but also as an attorney, and not specifically a marketer, you employ a marketing company to support you in that area. Well, let me tell you, you know a lot about marketing, and you've shared a lot that certainly has shown me that you've learned a great deal in your 14 years as an attorney, or specifically in managing a business. You've learned a great deal about marketing. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about managing a business. You personally are not just a family law attorney, you're also a business owner and you're managing and growing a practice. Let's talk a little bit about that aspect and the things that you've done to grow your business, to build a team, and how you've invested time and effort into the operational and growth side of the business. Talk a little bit about the team you have in place right now. How important is it to have the right staff in place, and how does that impact your ability to simply market and grow your firm?
Well, I mean, having the right support team is so important, obviously, for a number of, I think having good staff at your office helps us free up more time to be long-term and strategically minded. Obviously, we have day-to-day caseload material that we're working on, but if we have help and we can delegate some of that work, then we can think about and plan for the growth of our firm. So I think having good law firm employees who do their job well and free you up is really important. But I think the biggest help from like a growth perspective is having a good marketing team. We're not a big firm, so we don't have like an in-house marketing team, but I think having one out of office when we need it is really helpful. And I mean, just things like managing SEO, which I mentioned before, changes all the time, collaborating on blog posts. You may not have time to do, 2 posts a month, but you can collaborate on those kinds of things to free up your time. You can come up with the ideas, you can do the final editing and things like that. Super helpful to have somebody else helping you with the legwork. And then also, even things like, mentioned there's a digital marketing strategy and then a physical marketing strategy. And if I did a business sponsorship for my child's play and we have to generate a print ad, having a marketing team who can help you do that, because that's not your job or your specialty or expertise, is really helpful. So I think having a good marketing team to help with all of those things is super helpful. And I think that has helped us to make huge strides in growing our practice.
Good. Okay, good to hear. Now, with your transition to the Nowell Law Firm, you have a multifaceted practice. You focusing on family law and Mark focusing on, personal injury, workers' comp, and other practice areas. How has it been being a part of a multi-practice law firm? And how do you think it's impacted your ability to attract family law customers and the effort that's gone into marketing a multifaceted practice? Has there been a benefit in cross referrals, potentially Mark's clients having a family law need and potentially your family law clients having a need that Mark could fill?
We definitely have benefited from cross referrals. I mean, there have been a number of times where one of my family law clients has become one of Mark's personal injury clients, or a family member has, or something like that. Sometimes I transition it right over to Mark for something different. We always want to make sure that our current and former clients know all the different areas we serve. So if they had a good experience with us on their initial case, they'll want to come back for us to handle their subsequent matters, or their family members or their friends. But I think the way it impacts our marketing strategy is we want clients to know that we can serve a variety of areas. So the first thought someone has if they need a lawyer of any kind is to call us. And then if we can't handle it, we'll refer them to the right person. But if we can be top of mind for everything and everybody knows all the different areas that we serve, I think that point of contact is a really helpful thing.
Okay, very good. So let's turn the clock back. Let's go back to the beginning. Knowing what you know now, 14 years in, let's say you were starting a family law practice today, but with the benefit of 14 years of experience under your belt. What would you have done, or what would you do differently at a startup? Again, having the benefit of 14 years of legal practice.
I think a little bit of this we had to do because I had been practicing almost 10 years before I moved over with Mark, and he'd only been
Right.
here solo. So, and like you said, I brought family law to him. And so we sort of had to rebrand at that point. So what I tried to do then, what I would do even more of now if I had to start over, is one, I would definitely emphasize online client reviews. I'd probably be a lot more assertive about those, especially if you're starting with zero, just kind of legitimizing your business. You look for something on Amazon. If it has 4.6 stars, but only 5 reviews, you're not going to think as much of it as if it has maybe 4.4, but 1,000 reviews. So I think just building that up would probably be an important first step for somebody starting a marketing strategy from the ground up. And then I also would just get my name out there anywhere I could. It's all about branding. It's all about making your firm a household name. So I would do business sponsorships. I would create a strong website. I would make sure we had an otherwise strong online presence. I think branding is so critical for any new business, but I think law firms especially, because you're constantly having to recruit new clients. It's not like your eye doctor or your tax preparer. It's not something that you have to do every year. It's just, who are you going to pick? These people may not need legal services until one poignant time in their lives. And so you're constantly hustling to recruit new clients. And I think getting your name out there is the best way to do that.
All right, thank you. Now we're going to move into the rapid fire questions. So 4 questions, 30-second, 45-second answers, just something real quick. Question number 1. Maggie, what's the biggest misconception that potential clients have about family law attorneys?
That we're cutthroat with the singular focus of making life miserable for the other client on the other side of a case. That's the biggest misconception. We're not all that bad. I work regularly with pro se litigants, just meaning people who don't have their own attorneys. And although our mindset is always going to be to work out the best deal for our clients, that doesn't mean we can't simultaneously treat opposing litigants or opposing attorneys with dignity and respect. We're normal people too.
If you could invest in only one marketing activity for your family law practice specifically, what would it be?
SEO optimization. It's the one thing that we can't capitalize on just based on diligent work and recognition in the community.
Okay. What's the first thing you listen for when a potential client, family law client calls that tells you whether they're going to be a good fit or not?
Ooh, good question. What they say they're looking for. Anyone who says they want a bulldog or someone to teach him or her a lesson, or if they ask for someone who's cutthroat, I know right away that not only are those not things that I possess, those are not qualities that I would say that I possess as a lawyer, but they are also not what I am looking for. Those are not the kinds of clients that I would be really excited to represent, because they're also the clients whose expectations are going to be difficult to manage and whose priorities are going to be challenging to align with reality. So those are clients I'm happy to refer elsewhere.
Okay. And finally, what's one marketing or business development tactic that family law attorneys overlook, in your experience, that could significantly grow their practice?
Branding and marketing with an eye towards attaining general name recognition.
All right. Very good. I like that answer. All right, Maggie, thank you. This has been incredibly valuable. Great answers, great conversation. You've given us and those listening real strategies for marketing a family law, but more specifically, marketing a legal practice in a competitive market. You've talked a little bit about building reputation, leveraging your ties to the community and community involvement, differentiating yourself through your legal expertise as a family law attorney, navigating the ethical complexities of marketing a legal practice, because obviously you always have to keep an eye out to ethics and the state bar. You're limited in terms of how you can market your practice. So that creates unique challenges for attorneys. So for family law attorneys that are looking to grow their practice with integrity and effectiveness, how can people find you?
Well, they can visit our website, which we have. It's www.nowelllawfirm.com. That's Nowell lawfirm.com. Or anybody who has any questions about legal marketing is welcome to email me at maggie@nowelllawfirm.com.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So Maggie, again, thank you very much. And thank you for tuning in. If today's episode helped you rethink your approach to marketing a family law practice, building your reputation, subscribe to The Legal Edge. We're bringing proven strategies from attorneys who are actually building successful legal practices to you. So we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.